Next week. Joined now by Matt Schlapp, a former White House political director for George W. Bush and the chairman of the American Conservative Union, and Fred Karger, the president of Rights Equals Rights. He ran for president as a Republican in 2012. Well, Matt, let me start with you, and I'm curious how you read this one. We have those statements up there from Huckabee, from Ted Cruz, basically saying this is the persecution of Christians trying to exercise their faith. It raises the question to me, what about a gay Christian who's trying to exercise his or her right to get married?
Well, guess what? The Constitution allows for us to exercise our faith as we choose to exercise it. And this is the problem when the Supreme Court, in the stroke of a pen, upends 50 state laws on marriage. We've had a tradition where states would adjudicate how a marriage would happen. It stayed, and the Supreme Court upended it all, and in one fell step.
That's how it works, isn't it? I mean,
no, it's not.
The Supreme Court strikes down for it. But for instance, the Supreme Court 50 years ago, 60 years ago, strikes down separate but equal with Brown versus Board of Education, and suddenly laws are upended around the country. That is what happens.
You're right, it does, and I think it happens too much. I think when it comes to civil rights, clearly we're still debating these important issues around civil rights today, but we had a war, a civil war, and we passed 3 constitutional amendments around these issues on civil rights. The problem is with issues like abortion, and now we have the questions around marriage, is that when the Supreme Court upends all the state laws without going through that amendment process or without going through the democratic process, we will spend another generation, Steve, fighting about this. And I guarantee you, I don't think this county clerk is interpreting the law correctly at all. I think she needs to issue these licenses. But I agree with Rand Paul. If people start going to jail for exercising their religious beliefs, how is that going to get this country to any type of consensus?
Well, Fred, let me bring you in on that point, because it is interesting. I think we're entering this interesting cultural debate that's probably going to define the next few years, where gay marriage is now the law of the land in 50 states, and the people who remain morally or opposed to it on religious grounds are trying to carve out some kind of role in this society. Is putting somebody like this in jail only going to inflame the situation and the opposition that's still out there?
The clerk had ample opportunity to enforce the law. She was warned, if she didn't, that there would be consequences, and a very conservative federal judge, Judge Benning, put her in jail. And you have to obey the law when you're an elected official. She has so much nepotism going on in that office. It's a crazy place, and she's very hypocritical. But yes, she needs to obey the law. She needs to grant marriage licenses to everyone or pay the consequences.
Well, the case of Kim Davis has divided the Republican presidential field. Several candidates have come out strongly supporting her.
I think there ought to be some room for people to exercise their religious beliefs and not be told they have to do something they find morally objectionable.
I don't think anybody should have to choose between following their conscience, their religious beliefs, and giving up their job or facing financial sanctions.
Do you actually want to see other court clerks doing this?
Well, I want people to stand up for their convictions. I want them to have the courage of their convictions, not to acquiesce to a court ruling well, again, I would say to you, it is the interpretation of 5 unelected lawyers on the court.
On the other side, several candidates have pointed out that Davis doesn't work for a private company. She's employed by the federal government. She swore an oath to follow the law.
I sympathize with her religious beliefs, but she's a public official, and those of us in public life have to administer the law to every American as the law is written.
Given the role that she is playing, given the fact that the government is paying her salary, I think that is not appropriate. I think it's a very different situation for her than someone in a hospital who's asked to perform an abortion, or someone at a florist who's asked to serve a gay wedding. I think when you're a government employee, you are put in a different position.
So, Matt, you say ultimately she should be issuing the licenses. Carly Fiorina is saying that. Lindsey Graham is saying that. But why is no one else out there in the Republican field saying this right now? Why are so many, Mike Huckabee, for instance, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, why are they saying that this woman should not be giving out these licenses?
Look, I'm trying to look at the words of these presidential candidates as well, and it's hard to parse them, and I think over the next several days we'll understand it better. I think most of them are saying that what the Supreme Court did put us in this terrible situation where you can go to jail for exercising your religion, and something so basic as marriage been well understood in this country's history. So I think what they're saying is they sympathize with her. At the end of the day, if all these county clerks or elected officials take it on themselves to interpret the Constitution and to interpret Supreme Court decisions in their own manner, we will have legal chaos. That's not a good thing for a democracy. We actually have to have the rule of law, and the Supreme Court has spoken. I don't like how they've spoken, but they have spoken, and these clerks need to follow the law. I think many of the Republican candidates will actually explain that in the end, but I think they sympathize with this terrible position she's in.
Well, that's interesting because there's one candidate who is definitely not articulating the Supreme Court ruling that way. That's Mike Huckabee. This morning he said that Davis was in her right not to issue the licenses because she was following Kentucky law.
Well, when you say it's the law of the land, can you quote the statute that has been passed by the people's elected representatives? No. The only law she's following is the Kentucky law, which by constitutional amendment defines marriage as a man and a woman. The specific form that she is required to fill out for a marriage license specifically requires male and female. Now, if the Kentucky legislature decides that they agree with the Supreme Court and they change the laws of Kentucky, that's a whole different thing. But we're bordering on judicial tyranny here.
Fred, I watched that this morning, and that was astounding to me. First of all, let's clear this up. The form in Kentucky has been changed. It no longer requires male and female. There's Party A and there's Party B, so that part is inaccurate. But what Huckabee is saying there is flat out saying is that if a Supreme Court issues a ruling, it is only binding if individual states then put that ruling into legislative language. That is a shocking interpretation of the Constitution.
And this is a man running for President of the United States who a year ago said that if this happens, if the Supreme Court allowed gay marriage, it's not the voice of God, and he encouraged civil disobedience. So I today am calling on Mike Huckabee to step down. Candidate for President of the United States. He's unqualified to serve. He should drop out, refund the money, and go back to preaching or whatever he's doing.
I don't know. I have a feeling he's actually going to end up raising a lot of money off this one, especially now that she's been brought off to jail. But anyway, thank you to Matt Schlapp.